The Chalke History Festival special series on history with Jackson. Hello and welcome to History with Jackson, the home of accessible and digestible history. And welcome to our Chalke History Festival special series, where we'll be talking to some of the historians, living historians and performers here at Chalke about what they're doing at the festival and their work. Now, Chalke History Festival will be covered comprehensively through History with Jackson, be it on our social media, our blog, and our podcast. So if you wanted to check out more and learn more about what's happening at Chalke, do head to the links in the description below. Now, without further ado, I'll leave you to our Chalke History Festival special series episode.
Perfect. So welcome back to another episode of our Chalke History Festival special series here at on the History of Jackson podcast. I'm obviously not Jackson, I'm Abigail Rebecca, but more importantly, I am with George Butler, who has an incredible book out, which we will talk about later. But how are you going today?
Great. I've not been here before.
This is your first time at Chalke?
It's my first time at
It's
Chalke.
mine as well. Have you been enjoying it so far?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect, but it's such a nice... I mean, first of all, nice to come and talk about my work in Ukraine, but also just like poke my head in at other tents and hear what's going on.
Yes, you were described as a young historian earlier today.
Was.
How do you feel about that? Because you are creating history. You are creating history.
I am. I've never thought of myself as a young historian because I studied illustration and have always been on one side of a kind of journalist story. So, I mean, it's a really nice title, but I feel very flattered. I think other historians might think you're not really a historian,
But history, a big part of history is collecting oral stories. And what you're effectively doing in Ukraine is you are collecting these oral stories and turning them into this real published book that people can read in the UK, but also back in Ukraine.
That's really, good point. And I think as a first draft, anything that comes out of Ukraine at the moment is this first draft of history, and the words in the book are not mine. They are all testimonies of people I met and drew. And in that sense, you're right, it's a record, and I hope others will look at it like that.
How did you find yourself in Ukraine to begin with? How did you find yourself on this path?
I spent a lot of time in different war zones in Iraq and Syria and all across West Africa. And so when the full-scale invasion happened in Ukraine, I was commissioned by American Magazine to go and spend some time there and make some drawings in all those places like Bucha and Odessa and Kharkiv that suddenly became household names. And the book is the sort of sum total of all that time.
And the book is called Remember Also Me. How did you come to that title?
I found this poem by a man called Taras Shevchenko, who is a sort of huge cultural figure in Ukraine, and he wrote a poem called My Testament, and the last line of it is Remember Also Me. But when you read it today, I mean, it's written in 1845, but reading it today, it's really poignant in the way that it talks about people who are being lost at war and those who need to be remembered. And as soon as I read it, I thought, I have to have this in the book. And the museum in Toronto gave us permission to print it.
Wow, that's incredible. I feel as though very aptly named is the book, but also the way that you are creating you're putting a lot of intimate emotions into the stories that you are collecting, and Remember Also Me kind of reflects that intimacy.
Yeah.
But do you also think that intimacy helps to connect you to your audience? Put the Ukrainians back into that smaller picture that has been so widely...
Yeah, I think this is a problem with the way that we receive our news at the moment. Photographs are so transactional and ephemeral, and it's easy to remember the numbers from 43 million Ukrainians in the world. 7 or 8 or 9 of them have been internally displaced, and yet so easy to forget the stories of people like Olga and Vladimir and Sergei, who I spent time with, and without the process of drawing, which is a really intimate one. People have written books about sitting for Freud, and so it's really emotional to sit with people and spend time with them. And that was really, the drawing became the excuse to sit and listen to their stories.
Yeah. And have there been any stories that have particularly moved you to the point of...
Yeah, all of them.
All of them?
All the ones in the book.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we were talking about Olga before. She was a 99-year-old. She survived the Great Famine. She was taken to a collective farm. She was a slave in Germany during the war. And she escapes at the end of it when it's liberated, gets married, has 4 children, lives another 80 years. She's the beginning of the book. And then it's all the way through. A little boy, Vladimir, was shot in the head in the same accident that killed his mother. I sat with his father and he told me their story. And they're moving, and you can be as professional as you like about them and try and just write them down and put them in a place so you don't need to consider them ever again. But they're kind of drawn into my heart, I suppose.
I feel like they're probably going to stay with you your entire life now.
Yeah, I hope so, yeah. I think so.
On that vein of these stories sticking with you, do you feel as you have a great responsibility on your shoulder to make sure that the voices of the Ukrainian people that you are speaking to are kind of heard by people in the UK?
Yeah, in one sense, there's great relief in coming to places like Chalke Valley or the Waterstones in Piccadilly, where I sat this week, and telling other people, because in my mind there's a sort of secret promise, I suppose, to when you interview someone, that you are going to hold up your end of the bargain and tell people about it. But also more broadly, I think the way that we receive our news now doesn't give enough attention to the human story. It promotes destruction and sort of capital gain before social outcome or the real humanity that we know exists. And so any opportunity to talk about them, there's only 24 stories in the book, but any opportunity I think is an important one, just to try and reset that balance.
Yeah, bring the human element back in and try and remove this sensational kind of, like you said, capitalistic and transactional kind of media depiction we have of Ukraine.
That's why we all love a podcast at the moment, because there's time in our day to think about it. It's not being forced down our throats. It's easier to look at than the front pages. Lots of people are turning away from the news now, or feeling helpless in the face of it. We can't remember Gaza and Afghanistan and Ukraine and Myanmar all in the same breath. And podcast, in a way, the audio, and in the same way with illustration, just makes it a bit more palatable. It's a way that we can talk about it with our friends without feeling polarised, without that kind of easy divide that social media gives.
But also in your illustrations, they really give a sense that you care, and I think sometimes we can become so disconnected from stories of war that people feel that, and they then feel like we shouldn't be interested because there is that disconnect. And do you feel like you give that personal connection in your stories?
I think it can be really taxing, yeah, definitely. I really do care. I think there's nothing like focuses my brain more than when I'm drawing somebody and they're sitting. They're probably, sometimes I think I feel like they're being more honest with me than perhaps they are with their families or their neighbours. It's like having a doctor's appointment with someone and the person is telling you something that they haven't yet told their other people in their family, and that feels like such a responsibility to do right by that person.
And you are doing right by that person. Every story that you tell, you're doing it with such care and such dedication to making sure that they are true words that are theirs, true to them. How do you feel about the idea of your book going out to people in Ukraine? Do you think that they will feel a sense of a relief to hear their stories come back to them, or do you think they've said it in a doctor's office type space?
Wait to find out. I think the Ukrainians that I've shown it to, and the people who've turned up at talks, who've got Ukrainians living with them, or have of Ukrainian heritage, whose parents came here earlier in the century, have all been really moved by it, and have all found people in the book that they can relate to. So I'm really excited about taking it back. I need to go back with a box of books and deliver some of them.
Yeah.
But it's done in their image. The point of keeping their words is so that I'm not just a strange bloke that's turned up and taken made some pictures and left and told my own opinion. So it's their words, really.
Yeah. So one final question before we wrap up and we say thank you. But this is your first time at Chalke. It is also my first time at Chalke, and I want to ask you, what have you found to be your favourite thing while you've been walking around, or what are you looking forward to the most today?
Very good question. I managed to persuade Max Hastings to write the foreword to my book, so I had a little look in on his tent, which is obviously packed. But I would get lost if I was here with my sketch pad, which I could be later, drawing just the guys working with their hands, making blades, pumping the bellows, shoeing a horse. That's what I really want to draw.
Have you spoken to the stonemasons or had a look at their art? Because it is incredible. They're currently doing a Tree of Life from the Anglo-Saxon period, which is incredible.
That's up next.
But yeah, so if you just wanted to tell everyone where we could get your book, how we can get in contact with you,
a very nice
and
question.
follow along with your story.
Yeah. So my book's called Ukraine Remember Also Me. It's available in the shop at Chalke Valley, but it's also available in all good bookshops. And I so encourage you to buy it, not because I'll get £1.50, but because I think there'll be a character in there that you think that could have so easily been me if I was in a different circumstance.
Yeah.
And it's that person that I'd like you to remember.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and have a good rest of your day at Chalke History Festival.
Thanks for having me.